Hi, I'm Bart Hansen. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record at 4:45 p.m. Pacific Time every Monday. If you want to call in your hand, check out the instructions in the video description.
I have a hand from Harrah's New Orleans. It's a 1-3 game. The room allows for straddles anywhere, but this particular hand is unstraddled.
Okay.
And it's essentially uncapped buy-in. It's matched the biggest stack, but no one really pays that much close attention, so it's essentially uncapped.
This is in New Orleans, right?
Yes.
I've been to Harrah's New Orleans probably half a dozen times. I love it there because they send me their I'll get these offers for playing in Vegas to go down there, and all the games are uncapped, right? Like 2-5 no limit uncapped. Although I heard that a lot of the hold'em is slowed down there, and it's more PLO now.
There's certainly a PLO game that runs, but it's still not frequent, and I mean it's really just 1 or 2 nights a week, so hold'em is still predominant.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the hand I have, it's an unstraddled 1-3 hand, and +1 Old Man Coffee. He opens for $20, which was the biggest raise he had opened for that day.
Sure.
He opened for 15 a handful of times and limped a handful of times, and so it folds to me in the cutoff. And I have 6-3 of spades, and I decide to make the call there. I'm 13.50 effective with the Old Man Coffee.
So this sounds like me back in like 2006 or 2007 playing at the bike, calling with like 6-3 suited. The interesting thing here is that I guess you see that you think that he's got a big hand here, right? So you're like, shit, like
that was how I was reading.
We're playing like three. We're playing very, very deep here. This guy probably can't ever fold an overpair if I flop something. What I will tell you, though, John, is this is a little bit far out there because even with, again, newer school stuff, the modeling, like direct suited connectors just flop so much better than even gap suited connectors. I might go far down to like 6-4 suited in this spot in the cutoff. Also, too, you can call more on the button. So in a perfect world here, you'd be on the button, right? As opposed to being in the cutoff, and you'd want to have something a little bit better. I think that 6-3 suited, I probably would not call this hand here in the cutoff, but I imagine this was probably what was going through your head.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably the worst hand I call in the cutoff, and it probably is a hand I wouldn't normally call, but for whatever reason that day I decided to, for the same logic that you mentioned.
Yeah. So it's heads up.
So then it folds to the big blind, actually. So big blind is basically limp calling 100% of his hands, just the classic radical loose passive player. So he calls as well. We're about 800 effective with the big blind.
So the big blind has 800. Okay.
So we go to the flop. It comes out the 6 of diamonds, 6 of clubs, 3 of diamonds. So pretty favorable flop.
So you flop a full house.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So the big blind checks. The +1, he continues for $50.
Oh my God, this is great. I love it. This brings me all the way back to old. Hold on. This brings me back all the way to old school. Old school. If anybody used to watch me live at the bike, old school poker. Now, on the surface, a lot of people, and we'll probably use this one for YouTube, would say, why on earth would you ever raise here? You have a full house. There's nothing for you to be scared of. My contention here right off the bat is this is exactly what we wanted. It doesn't matter if we're full or we have a 6, whether it's 3's full, 5, 6. We have better than an overpair. This OMC has raised to 20 pre. He has an overpair here a huge majority of the time. So if you play it fast, old school poker against these types of guys, that usually will win the most amount of money. Because what ends up happening is if you call next to act here, sometimes you won't get a bet on the turn. So calling has done nothing for you because the betting lead has changed because now the guy's pot controlling front out of position. And you will, but even if you have action card killers that can come too, right? You see a couple diamonds out there. But even if he bets again, if you raise him on a later street, that's so much more strong than raising him right away. getting more money in the pot and then just building, building, building. He's going to check call and check call. That's my take here on this one.
So I did go ahead and raise. I don't know if I raised quite large enough size, but I made it 120.
Oh, I would have went larger than that.
Yeah, looking back on it,
because here's the issue with making it 120, right? Now, if you want to like click it to make your hand look like you've got like pocket eights or pocket nines and you're raising for protection and you think the guy's going to 3-bet you or he's going to like play a stop and go. The problem with 120 is that if you raise small or you raise big and the action of this OMC doesn't change, meaning he's just going to go call into check call mode, then there's no reason to raise small. You see what I'm saying? Like I would make it like 225. Just start shoveling the money in here. 200, I would probably make it at least 200. I might make it 225. But okay, so you raised to 120.
Yeah, the big blind folds. The OMC, sure, thanks for 30 seconds. Ask me if I have a 6 and then calls.
So OMC calls.
So I'm putting him pretty solidly on a strong overpair at this point.
Yep.
So we should have about 300 in the pot. And the turn comes an offsuit king of spades.
Okay.
So +1 checks, and this is an interesting decision. But I decide ultimately to check back. I can give you my logic on that, but I don't know if that's abysmally bad play or reasonable.
I mean, I don't think I would check for the same reasons. I mean, you were saying you're checking why? Because you want to make your hand look like a flush draw, or are you like pot controlling against like pocket king? Like if you check this back, right? The pot's 300, and then the river's like a deuce or some shit like that, and then he bets 300. Are you just calling? Is that part of your?
No, I'm raising on the river if he leads, but I think my thought was queens and under those overpairs. I just don't think I'm getting 2 streets out of them. Now the kings come, I think he's scared enough of ace king, whether it's realistic I have a king or not is a different question, but I think he's scared of the king in general if he has queens or lower. And so my thought was I'm really only targeting at this point like ace king of diamonds, specifically in pocket aces. In those 2 hands I can go for 2 streets against, but everything else I'm only going to get 1 street.
Well,
that was my thought.
I mean, I don't know if the king should really change much, though. I don't know how the OMC does hand reading, but if the OMC's got like tens, jacks, queens, kings, and you had raised the flop, and you bet like 150 to 200 in the turn, I don't think he's folding because of the king. The other thing too that I do want to,
he's folding calling river bet too.
I mean, it depends on what comes, but the other thing that I want to point out though, because I'm telling you to pile money in, and I would still start piling money in, is that if you had checked back when you check back the turn, right? Like I said, let's say the river is an offsuit 9 or an offsuit deuce, and this OMC bets 300 at the end, you're burning money if you raise the end, in my view. Like, I would put in a crying call if he were to bet pot at the end if you check this back on the turn. So that's where you and I disagree. So I don't see checking back the turn to raise the river on any card. I mean, I see where you're going, but I would just still continue to bet. Okay, so you check it back.
I don't think I disagree. I'm probably just wrong.
All right.
So on the river, we get an offsuit 5.
Okay.
And so then
it's a pretty big break.
Just like you were saying, he actually leads $200. And like I said, my plan was to raise if he did in fact lead, because I figured he might be leading aces, maybe ace king, if he happened to have ace king of diamonds.
So let me do some before you say anything that happens. Yeah. I want to do some math about the stat. So the pot was 300 to roll the river, and you put in a raise for 120. Again, you called with 6-3 suited in the cutoff, and it came out 6-6-3. He bet 50. You made it 120 call. So the pot's 300. So you guys have about 1,200 to start on the river, right? Because that's very, very important there. There have been some calls about there have been some questions about this, and I say, you have to ask yourself what type of player you are. Now, there is stack depth here. The 200 is a little bit concerning because when you look at what is he value betting on the river here, it's going to be aces, if he bets aces, yeah, okay, he's got aces here, which is 6 combos, and then of course, there's pocket kings, which is 3 combos. So when I look at these spots and I have stack depth, I'm like, how much can aces call me? Is it worth a raise? And then you have to ask yourself a question: can I make this like 550? And am I capable of folding if he 3-bets me all in at the end? A raise fold with a full house on the river. Because I got to tell you, if this guy's an OMC and you make this 500 and he jams, he's going to have pocket kings. I'm sorry to say. Close to 100% of the time, if definitely not enough for you to call with pot odds at the end. This bet is a little bit concerning to me. It really would depend on like what I had seen from this guy with the sizing and stuff like that. Like, yeah, he could have ace king of diamonds too, but a lot of OMCs they don't necessarily value bet at the end. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten here like this, but that's my take. What did you do?
So I actually did pretty much exactly that. So I raised the 550. I figured I'd make it kind of a reasonable size so he could side call with aces.
Made it 550. Okay.
And he just insta shoves on me. And so, the insta shove kind of was the deal breaker for me. So I ended up folding it. I don't know if I would have folded if it was not quite as quick he just said all in basically as soon as he realized that I had put in a raise. So, that was sort of how I approached it. Was I figured at that point he's not shoving aces for value.
So did you find out what he had?
I did not, unfortunately. I'm sorry, that's the rough way to end the call. But I showed him to try to get him to show me, and he just, acted surprised and said, good hand.
I mean, here's the other interesting thing here too is that, I mean, if I got to the river, I would have played it exactly the same as you. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if you had bet the turn, because a lot of these guys get so excited. Like, you raise the flop, and then let's say you bet the turn, they probably aren't going to check raise top full. What would happen, which is kind of interesting, right? Like, if they want, when you look at the theory behind it, if they wanted to stay consistent, let's say that you bet the turn, right? And he's got kings full and he calls, right? If he wanted to stay consistent, he should be checking the river, right? Because you're going to either bet off a 6 or you're betting some sort of busted flush draw. But what you'll see from these OMCs, let's say you bet 175 on the turn, okay? And he calls. So now the pot's like 550. Instead of him checking the river, he'll come out and bet like 500 at the end. Like, it'll go like 175 call, and then he'll just plow with an upfront bet of 400 or 500. I've seen it all the time. And then, you just sort of shrug call, and you're like, fuck, this guy's got pocket kings. You don't have to put a raise in, obviously. You would certainly just call. If he check called turn with kings full, if you had bet, and he puts out any type of pot, like bet that's over, like, say, 50% of the pot, you certainly can't raise. And then if it got to the river and he checked the river and you bet and he check jammed you, it's still a fold. And that's like the bread and butter of live poker with a lot of these guys, is just bet folding, raise folding for value. I think you made a good play at the end. I appreciate the call. Hey guys, if you like what you've seen here, please click on the subscribe button and you'll get notified every time we put up a new video. And if you want to check out crushlivepoker.com for the first month free, use the code YTA200. Click on the link right there.